Alright guys, so a quick video here about how I solved my leak in my Jeep. So I've got a 2016 Jeep JKU. I was getting water down here at the bottom. As you can see, I've removed the bottom door plate here so I can actually see what's going on. So part of this is if you have a leak coming in down here in the corner and down into your carpet, first thing you should do, definitely remove this little cover. You will uncover exactly what's going on, which was part of the problem. For the longest time I thought this was leaking down in here, and all the videos I saw were, let's patch this little cowl gasket, all that good stuff, but that ended up not being the problem. The initial problem I had was actually on where the latch is. So what was happening is water was actually leaking down the inside here. Let me zoom out so you can see a little better. And it was coming down the inside of the door, and it was actually landing right down here on top of the trim, going behind the trim, landing down here, and then dropping down here underneath the trim. Now what would happen is the water would travel along this weld seam here. Eventually it would pool as much as possible over here, and eventually would get so high that it would just tip over the side into the carpet underneath this entire plastic piece of trim. So the only way I can figure that out is by removing this plastic trim. So I suggest doing that if you have a leak. So step one was, what do I do? Okay, so the first thing I did was I actually replaced the outer door seal for the passenger side door here. And so this is the newer style one. It has the little bit beefier of a weather strip on both the inside and the outside areas. So you can see this has got this thicker strip on it. So I ended up replacing that, and it didn't solve the problem. It made it a little bit better, but it was still leaking in the same spot down here in the corner behind this trim. The next step was replacing this mucket up here, so I replaced that, and that actually solved a lot of the problems. But it was still leaking a tiny bit. So what I ended up doing is actually loosening this up and pulling it out somewhat, and so that helped significantly. I moved it maybe 2 millimeters out, and that provided enough of an air gap, I think, behind the gasket that allowed it to empty out cleanly. The other thing I did was, in the new style gasket, there is a hole in here. So if you pop this off, I don't want to do it now because I've got this all together. There is a hole behind here, and what I did is actually filled it with foam. The foam is actually about this big. It's pretty firm, and what that does is it allows this piece of the weather strip to be pushed forward when it's flush against the inside of the door. So when this is flush, that pushes it forward and allows all the rain to kind of come out correctly. So that was one of the things I did, and that was what finally solved the inside leak that was coming in behind here that I didn't even notice was happening. So again, just to recap, I replaced the mucket, I replaced the seal along the door, and on the inside latch area I put a thick piece of rubber, and that's just to keep it nice and plumped up so when it seals better. And then I actually loosened this up about 2 millimeters and brought it out towards me, and that allowed all the water to correctly come down this area and empty out the bottom. The problem also happened that after I placed this weather seal on the outside is I actually started to get a real leak from the inside. So to fix that, I did quite a few things. I played with moving this inside and outside a little bit more. I moved it, I think it's outside maybe an extra millimeter or two. Anyway, I wouldn't bother with adjusting these hinges at all. I would leave them the way they are. And what I ended up doing was, with this new gasket, this was nice, but if you get a leak on the inside, the first thing you should do is check to see if water is coming in behind here. If you see water coming in behind here, that's the source. That's where what it'll do is it'll travel along the inside here, travel down, and then dump out inside your car. So what I ended up doing was, if I were to pop this off, I actually cut a hole behind this weather seal and then stuffed this with some of that rubber that I used on the other side. And so inside here, you can't tell, it's actually a little bit thicker. You can see there's let me zoom out so you can see. So that's where it ends. So coming up, and then that's the end right there. So that's about the size of the piece of rubber. And that created more of a seal against the inside pillar here. And that helped a little bit, but I was still getting quite a bit of water coming down the inside. And what was happening is, because I added this piece of rubber in here, the water was now coming down the channel correctly, but it was actually going over this. So this was added, this is part of the newer seal, and water is dripping behind this and coming in that way. So, and you can tell when you look at the button here, because you'll see water kind of travel along this section down here. And what I ended up doing was, you can't easily replace this mucket seal here. This actually goes, I believe, underneath the whole windshield all the way to the other side of the car. And so to replace that, I believe, requires someone actually removing the glass off the front of the Jeep. And so what I ended up doing was I removed the initial piece of rubber foam that was here. I just peeled this back a little bit, and the initial piece was about this big. And what I did was I ripped it off, and I used camper tape. So this is camper tape, and I cut it to be bigger. So this is maybe an inch longer than the piece of rubber that came with the car. And what I did is I cut it and I fitted it right in here. And this is important. If you are going to replace this, what you need to do is make sure this is a nice sharp angle. If it's square, what the water is going to do is it's going to pool inside and come down this direction. So what I ended up doing is I cut it really tight. So this is a nice sharp angle coming down. And there's also a sharp angle underneath this piece of rubber. And I stuck that on there. I'll put some links in the description for all the products I purchased. And so what I did is I stuck that on there, and then I ended up using, to get a better kind of seal, because I wanted this as flush as possible, I used, it's called windshield silicone. It's like it almost goes on like a water, like a really nice smooth liquid, and then hardens up to be a nice silicone caulk. And it's made by Permatex. You can get it at any auto parts store, and I'll see if I can dig out a link for that as well. But basically I put a little bit in here and around the top of this camper tape, and I also put a little bit in here and along this rubber where the actual seal ends to the camper tape, to create a super nice seal so that there's no way water is getting in behind here. And after I added this, all the water exited correctly. So if I were to close this door, if I close this door, let's see, when the water goes down here, down, what ends up happening is right near where these nuts are, you will see the water actually kick out from the car, and that's how you know the seal's working correctly. So anyway, this is again what I replaced. You shouldn't have to put like huge amounts of camper tape over here, or like you'll see other YouTube videos where people are putting tape all the way down this thing. First thing to do, diagnose where the water is coming in, and then go from there. Some people you'll see will spray soapy water. Other people will, figure out other different ways to triage the problem. But literally, if you see behind here, you'll find water traces from where the rain came in, and that's how you kind of figure out where the leak started. And then you just keep going up and up and up until it stops.